Hello and welcome to the Nintendo Nostalgia Podcast. My name is Chris Warren, and I am so excited to be your host today. Also joining me for this episode, we have my good friend and co host, Joshua Taylor. We are back and we're playing with power. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about a game that is so near and dear to my heart. I absolutely love this game. But before we get into that and what we are radical rexing about, let's see how Josh is doing today. So, Josh, how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. Shoot, I was trying to come up with a joke there for about 3 seconds, and I was like, I'm just not. Well, I just wasn't ready. I wasn't ready for that. I didn't have anything. My material was all used up.
Well, I'm glad you're doing okay. Hopefully, Jacob's doing okay. If not, I'm sure the funeral arrangements will be happening within the coming week or weeks. Yeah, so Jacob is not with us today. A, he's dead, and
God rest his
B,
soul.
yeah, and B, we decided to fire him because the time has come, really, and we're gonna take over the
Fire
reins
him
from
after
here.
he dies.
Yeah, exactly. Let's
Very
twist the
necessary.
dagger. So, yeah. So, why don't we get into what we are radical rexing about? All right. So, Josh, since it's just you and me today, I would be happy to have you start us off. So, what have you been radical rexing about?
All right. So, well, with the start of this new year, there hasn't been a whole lot exciting going on except we have finally, over a long period of saving up Christmas gifts and things like that. Long story short, we have saved up enough to possibly make Walt Disney World happen here for us in the next several months. Long
Awesome.
story short, on that, we have a free place to stay. This has been kind of planned. We try to make something like this happen every once in a while, and every time it does, we slowly save up. Um, Stimulus, things like that might have helped. But basically it is one of our favorite places to go. It's somewhere I very much love. I know it is super. I know it's overpriced. We're all aware of that, but I can't
Yeah.
really help it. It's where we went for a honeymoon.
Yeah. It's just one of those things.
I used to go there a ton as a kid. I have a lot of great memories from that. This will be the second time my daughter has been, and she's now 6, so she should remember this one pretty well. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. It'll be the first time I've gone. One thing in particular I'm really excited about. It'll be the first time I've gone since the Galaxy's Edge area has been added, and I'm a big Star Wars fan, so I'm definitely excited to go see that.
Nice.
So now after this, depending on the plans, just depending how life goes, I guess, and when that park will be finally built, the next plan may be to go to Universal for that Super Nintendo World
Awesome.
at the time it opens in Orlando. Now, if that's like 5 years off, we're probably going to take a vacation again before then. But that's sort of that's the plan in my head if it all goes according to plan.
Right. Yeah. I have no idea how the progress is going with the Florida one. I know the Japan one is almost done, but no clue how much progress they've made on the USA one. But I'm thinking like within 2 years they'll probably have that ready.
I very much hope so. I know it's not just Nintendo in that area there. So
Yeah, I can't wait to do that.
there's going to be a lot to that area. Nintendo's just part of it. But yeah, even the one in Orlando, from what I've seen, is supposed to have a Donkey Kong area along with the Mario stuff that Japan got, and that makes me almost even more excited. Um, like especially if they have like a mine cart ride and all of that sort of thing, that would be amazing. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to that. So that's probably the biggest thing on my mind. I always get super excited for that.
Yeah.
I love going to trips in general anyway, and I was stuck in West Virginia all of 2020. I don't know if a year of my life I've never left the state. So that was very uncomfortable to me. But yeah, other than that, really just kind of still hopping around on some different games. I can't keep up with it all, even myself, because if there's nothing new coming out, I'm like, hey, I want to play this. Let's jump to this. Let's jump to that. And I'm kind of in the middle of that right now.
hmm
So
Any games in particular that have really stood out to you?
just out of the hype, I started messing around again on Jedi Fallen Order on my Xbox. Kind of started New Game Plus, and I love that. That game's awesome.
Great.
Hopped around on. I still can't believe I'm saying this, but I've hopped around on Fortnite with some friends. Um, it's just
You're becoming your own worst enemy.
yeah. 2020 was rough on me. It's hurting me. I'm changing
Right.
as a person.
You're a new Josh.
Animal Crossing, the normal stuff, just a little bit of everything.
Okay. Oh, you jump back into Animal Crossing. Okay. So how what's going on with like January? Is there any fun events with Animal Crossing at the moment?
Right now it's kind of slow, I guess, after like the whole Christmas and New Year's and all of that sort of thing went on. But I believe there's a big update coming near the end of the month, if I remember correctly. I can't remember what all it is, but I know they're keeping that rolling, and I like that. Especially
Yeah.
since my daughter got her own Switch recently, so it's kind of brought me back into it a little bit.
Right. Yeah. How did she react to her gift? I keep meaning to ask you about that.
Oh yeah, she loved it. That was one of her biggest things she wanted. She pokes at it. I mean, we don't let her sit there and play the Switch all day long, but she still pokes at that
Right.
almost daily. So I think that was a uh, good gift, a good call, I guess. But
Yeah.
so that's been fun.
Do you have that recorded by any chance? Like the moment that she opened it?
I don't actually. We got a lot of pictures and things
Ah.
like that. I'm not, I'm not,
Okay.
I'm not quite my mom. My mom used to have like the big, giant, like, I don't even know what to call it. I guess like,
Camcorder?
yeah, yeah, that big thing out like every Christmas and record like the whole thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. Yep.
but yeah,
Okay, well that's cool. Yeah, that was a great gift. I was really happy when you told us that you were gonna get her that. So that's awesome that you're finally able to do that. And now like father like daughter when it comes to gaming. And it'll be cool to see like how your tastes kind of evolve with each other. You know.
hopefully a little more balanced than me, and hopefully she'll make good use of it you know, before she's my age.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what kind of games she gravitates towards, you know, like it'll be kind of surprising to see if she's like, you know what, I don't want Kirby, I want, Call of Duty or something else
Gosh,
like totally out of left field, you
turn
know.
on me.
So that'll be funny, I'm
She
sure.
seems very creative, so that might be a good thing.
Cool, great.
Not Call of Duty, but I just mean the fact that she's creative.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I'm sure she'll find some unique creative titles that might suit her taste, you know. Cool. That's great. Glad to hear that you're doing well and you're playing around with some games. For me, with radical rexing and all that stuff, I literally just got my Pro controller back, my Switch Pro controller. You probably saw in the chat, but in September, I had my left Joy-Con broke. My left Joy-Con broke, and so I had to mail that one in. That took a month, and then I had my right Joy-Con break, and then that took a month for them to fix. And now I finally got my Pro controller back. So after what 3 4 months, after a few months, I finally have the controllers that I need to have some fun with my games. And like for me, like I need my Pro controller because before it, like I was just trying to deal with my faulty B button, but like it's just I can't do that. Especially with like Killer Queen Black, I was trying to play a match with that. You need to like really tap on that B button, and
Nah.
I can't get away with that and act like that's okay. So, luckily they sent me a brand new one. So I was kind of annoyed at first that I pay $30 just to get a new B button because I didn't feel like repairing it myself. It's like a lot more involved than one might think. But yeah, they sent me a
Yeah.
totally brand new one. So I got a new battery and just all new buttons. It feels totally like brand new, obviously. So really thrilled about that. In my personal life, I just started my internship, and everyone that I work with is just so awesome. Like everyone's just been so helpful and just like super friendly. Like we've been going out to lunch, and they're like so willing to teach me everything about my job. So I'm so happy, and I'm thrilled that I got assigned to this particular place. And if I get hired there, I'll be happy to move to this area. It's in a very clean, spaced out, like natural area. So I kind of do hope that I get hired after this. I love it. Every day's been awesome. Gaming wise, honestly, I've just been playing the game that we'll be talking about. So I've been playing a lot of Rayman, and that has been on the 3DS. I haven't been playing the N64 version. And also, we had that trailer drop today for Super Mario 3D World,
Oh yeah.
and I am a huge Super Mario 3D World fan. That was the reason I got my Wii U. I admit that when I saw the first trailer during that E3, I think that was like E3 2013 or something, I was like devastated and so disappointed because that was just a horrible first reveal of that game. It looked so boring, especially after the two massive Galaxy games that we had. And also, 3D Land wasn't too shabby. But, after they had that second trailer that followed shortly after, I was like, okay, this is it for me. And oh man, that game, I don't even know where to begin. I absolutely love that game. Like, actually, Josh and I, we were talking about this today. Josh and I totally can't fault him for thinking this way. And correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, but Josh, I think you prefer like more open 3D type games like Mario Odyssey. And, like I was saying before, that's my preference too, or at least it was. But like until 3D World came out, I was just like, wow, this is now my new preference. Like just having these, I don't know. I guess the way that I would describe it is like these curated, very thoughtfully designed stages, and yeah, like just bouncing around between these different stages where it's like they have these like designated paths for you and they have these like curated short experiences for you. That's kind of my preference because I feel like the platforming in that way is a little bit better because it's just like nonstop platforming. But with 3D environments, it's more about exploration, so that's fun in its own way. But I think when it comes to my 3D Mario games, I kind of prefer 3D World. So I personally am thrilled about this new port. I just pre-ordered it today, and I got the amiibo on the way as well. And this new what is it? Bowser's Fury stage seems really interesting and weird, and that's I'm just all about it. So, Josh, what are your thoughts on this new 3D World port? I'm really curious.
Well, actually, with like the original 3D World, I got it on Wii U as well, and darn it, this is really tempting to pick up, just for multiple reasons. But yeah, I think it was kind of like you. Like initially, I was a little bit disappointed, like with the reveal of the original 3D World. I actually felt kind of the same way about 3D Land. Like it just to me, it just felt like it was almost I don't know how else to word it other than sort of because I love Mario, but almost like a generic Mario, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
Because it was
yeah,
just
yeah.
sort of that same flagpole.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like even with like Mario 2 and 3, well, not 2 in Japan, but like for example, the goalpost was different and world and things were different,
Right.
but it was like I felt like they were so stuck on nostalgia and sticking like the Tanuki leaf in there and things like that. I'm kind of talking about land as well, but
Mm-hmm.
I just felt like there wasn't it didn't look like there was a whole lot of fresh ideas. It looked a little stale maybe, but once I got to playing it, once I gave World a big chance, I think it actually ended up being pretty great in its own way. It's almost like I still prefer games like Odyssey or 64 or something,
Mm-hmm.
but it's it's sort of different. Like I don't know if I can really fairly compare the two. It just depends on what I'm in the mood for.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think they're both
but
great in
yeah,
very different ways.
for sure, for sure. And I mean, and like with 3D World, you can play that in co-op, and I think it actually plays pretty well in it. Where, the
Mm-hmm.
3D games, a few of them you can, but it's not very great. You know, the co-op
Right.
slot.
Right.
I think something else with Land and World, not to get stuck on that for too long, but that kind of
Mm-hmm.
bugged me was the way it looks with like the land, like everything. Even in World, it kind of did this, where everything was like floating for no reason. You know what I mean?
like
uh,
the
yeah, like the
levels, you
whole
mean?
level would just be floating. Where like
Yeah.
I can't really compare it to Odyssey because it came out after, but like with Sunshine, or even with
Mm-hmm.
64 to an extent. Granted, it was a little more limited. Some levels were still kind of floating, but it didn't feel as off there.
Right.
I just feel like it felt more natural, especially with Sunshine in particular.
Yeah.
Galaxy kind of had the same thing, except it had a reason to with the planets and things like that.
Right. Right. It went with the theme.
Yeah, where
Yeah.
I just felt like this was just a bunch of blocks kind of slapped together to make the level work. So I didn't like that at
Right.
first, but again, it's like the more I go back to it, the more I'm sort of okay with it, and I've sort of
Yeah.
gotten over that. I feel like it's being a little petty, but I think it was just not what I wanted out of Mario at the time. But now,
Yeah.
looking at it now, I'm like, oh, this is fine.
Yeah, yeah. You know, the when you talk about it that way, and I completely agree with you know, a lot of what you're saying, really. But I think, like you said, it's not really what we wanted at that time. Like at that time, you know, we had Mario Galaxy and then Mario Galaxy 2, these massive grand space adventures that just totally took the rule book and threw it out and just threw everything in the washer machine, whatever that saying is, into those games. Like they were just oozing with personality and level design ideas. And you know, and then we had 3D Land, which was very interesting and unique in its own way, and kind of did its own weird thing, where it was like a balance between Galaxy and the older like 2D games. So that was interesting, but like it was just such a weird way to introduce that game to us, 3D World, because a it's called 3D World, okay, but it's not in 3D. So right off the bat, that was just like odd and uncomfortable and weird for us to get used to, and kind of all of us were like just like, okay, I mean, I guess you can call it that. But you know, the more that you really understand their intention behind it and the ambition behind it, where it's like, you know, 3D Land was awesome, but we're just going to make it a little bit more co-op-y and multiplayer focused. And you know, in the trailers it kind of looks like their ideas were kind of stale. Like, oh, okay, we have clear pipes, like that's what you're bringing to the table, clear pipes instead of green ones, okay. But like, if you really, you know, look at the levels themselves and what they bring to the table, there's a lot of new introductions into each stage, and a lot of very, very clever level design that really doesn't really show itself until you start to play it and really understand why, from like a platforming perspective, like a platform design perspective, so clever and ambitious, and you know, not really what we were expecting at that time, but kind of what we needed for those of us who like just genuinely enjoy great platforming experiences. So, yeah, sorry to
Yeah.
drown out our talk about 3D World, but I'm glad that we got that out of our systems.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am, but overall, I'm extremely excited for the 3D World port, and it's going to be really cool. A, to play it portably, so I'll be able to play that game anywhere once I'm able to go places, and I think we can play online, right?
From what I've heard, I believe so. I almost forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll be a great introduction. So, as much as I love the Wii U version, I feel like this will just be like a more perfected version that like we'll all end up playing.
Yeah.
And you know, the bigger the audience for it, the better. You know, it'll just be fun to like talk about with people online and kind of have these shared experiences in that way. So, yeah. Also, totally. Gonna add this to my radical correct thing. I believe that I have been qualified to get the vaccine in the current phase. So I haven't gotten an email yet, but I am in 1A. So I am hoping to get my first vaccine very soon, and I am overjoyed about that. And the reason for that is because of my internship. So apparently, if I work in, you know, a service that's you know, considered to be an essential service, you know, public health, then I qualify for it, even if I'm not technically being paid for it. It's an internship. So yeah, we'll see what happens with that, but that would be a huge relief for me. So just wanted to throw that out there. Anyway, I think this would be a great time for us to jump into our topic, and that is Rayman 2: The Great Escape for the N64. So, Rayman 2 came out in October of 1999. Rayman 2: The Great Escape is the sequel to a game that was originally a PlayStation gem, and that was a Rayman, just straight up Rayman. And I didn't know about that game until much, much later. So for me, Rayman 2 is my first game. The company that developed it was Ubisoft, and I guess you could classify this game as being like excuse me, like a 3D action adventure, kind of like collectathon type game. But it's not really like an open world game in the way that, Banjo Kazooie and Banjo Tooie are. It's a slightly more linear than that. You do kind of have like this map where you kind of jump into each level. So it's not so much that there's like this grand open world and you kind of pick and choose where you want to go, really. But it is very similar to a game that came out a little bit before this. And Ryan wanted me to make sure that I mentioned this. So Tonic Trouble was also made by Ubisoft. And Tonic Trouble, from what I understand, is very similar to Rayman. It's almost like a rough draft of what Rayman came to be, really. I haven't played it personally. I do hear pretty good things, but I hear that, Rayman 2 is just like a better version of Tonic Trouble. Josh, do you have any experience with Tonic Trouble?
I do, but it's been a long time since I've really dug into it. I actually put it in earlier today for about 5 minutes, and I didn't really have time to get into it just to kind of refresh some things. And yeah, I think that's probably a pretty good description of it. If you've played Rayman 2, I don't know if it's really necessary. I mean, you can go back and try it if you want. It's just, I don't know. Maybe I'd need to go back and give it another shot. But from what I remember, it was fairly fun. Even back in the day, I hadn't played it a lot. I think I rented it once or twice.
Okay, gotcha.
I will say it is strangely, like if you haven't seen it, it looks a lot like Rayman. Like
Right,
he's like
yeah.
limbless,
Yeah, yeah.
but he's purple.
Hmm.
He almost looks like a vegetable or something. I don't know how else to describe it.
Right. Well, isn't he like a potion? I'm just imagining if it's called Tonic Trouble, isn't he a potion himself or something
I
like that?
don't remember.
Okay.
That's a good question. I just always find it a little funny that it's like Ubisoft ripped off themselves.
Right, yeah.
I'm not sure what the intention was there, if they wanted them to sort of coexist or
Right.
what the deal was.
You know what's even weirder though? I was looking this up a little bit before we started doing this. I believe Tonic Trouble came out the exact same year as Rayman 2, which is very strange considering A, how similar they are, and B, how much better Rayman 2 is from what I understand. So, and I think it wasn't even just the same year, like they were just within like a few months of each other. So, that's weird. Not really sure what the story is behind that, but I'm just glad that we got to Rayman 2 in some way. So, whatever. I'm sure there's a good story there somehow, but oh well. But yeah, I was playing Rayman 2, just so that I could brush up on it for this episode, and I really wasn't sure how it would hold up. It was one of my first games ever, really, and I played it before Banjo Kazooie. I played it before, a lot of the gems that I would come to appreciate, like Mario Sunshine and Donkey Kong 64. And I have to say, this game holds up so much better than what I expected. It is truly like timeless in my opinion, which is really saying something because it was one of the first 3D platformers and everything just works so well. It controls well. It looks amazing. It sounds amazing. The characters are interesting. There's so much to dive into really. So before we really get to the nitty gritty of the game and why I think it's so awesome. Can you tell me a little bit, Josh, about your nostalgia for the game and like what comes to mind when Rayman 2: The Great Escape comes to mind?
So for me, honestly, I don't have a whole lot of nostalgia for it. It's kind of surprises even myself because this is really up my alley, especially at the time. On the N64, I played Mario 64 and Banjo Kazooie and Tooie and Donkey Kong 64, all of that sort of stuff back when it was released. And I think I just wasn't really familiar with Rayman at the time, so I guess it didn't immediately catch my attention. Or like with Banjo Kazooie's sake, I knew Rare, I knew Diddy Kong Racing, so that already pulled me in. So I figure, especially because I didn't have a
Right.
PlayStation, my assumption is I just sort of overlooked it at the time. I vaguely maybe remember seeing ads and things like that of it. I may have rented it once.
Yep.
So I feel kind of weird saying that because now, I'm quite a big fan of Rayman, and I've been around Ubisoft quite a bit and things like that. So I feel weird even saying that I missed out on it, but I kind of did. I've played it more in recent years. I got it on the first time I remember actually legitly playing it is on the well, legitimately like getting into it was on the 3DS version. It's been a few years back now. not too long after it came out. It was on a pretty decent sale, and I was like, well, hey, let's jump into this. And I've really enjoyed it. Again, I don't think I've actually fully completed it, which is kind of strange for me with this sort of game. I don't have anything hardly really bad to say about it. Maybe we'll get more into some of my deeper thoughts in a bit, but yeah, I don't have a whole lot of nostalgia for it except for in recent times, and then going back and since then I have actually played it some on the 64 and even the PlayStation version a little bit, just to sort of try it all out. But yeah, I definitely feel like I missed out on playing this as a kid.
Yeah, so for me, I my best friend had this game. I'm not really sure why she did. I think that she, like me, saw the ads all the time. I don't remember if they were like print ads, if they're like TV commercials or something, but they really leaned into the whole like him not having limbs thing, and I guess that was supposed to make him interesting or funny and quirky in some way. So I do remember seeing ads of some sort and having like a vague interest in the game. But I'm glad that you mentioned that you were really hooked into the rare ecosystem, for lack of a better way of putting it. And that's just what we were used to and kind of like what we gravitated towards, because that rare
Yeah.
logo was like a symbol to us to be like, okay, that's what I want. If it's not that, I don't know if I'm gonna like it, but I do know that if I see a rare logo, I'm probably gonna want to play that game. So that's kind of like what we went, what what we were attracted to as kids, basically. So for me to go outside of that was kind of like, I'm not sure how this is gonna go. I'm not too familiar with how other companies do things, but yeah, my friend got the game. I asked her if I could borrow it because I'm like, hey, you're not playing that. Do you mind if I like give it a try? She's like, yeah, sure. And I just spent days and days playing this game, and the whole time I'm like, whoa, this is like really good. I was not expecting that at all, and I just had such a great time. It was a very slow summer for me. Like, this is when I was 10 and there really wasn't too much to do when you're 10. You can't get a summer job. You're kind of just hanging out in the summer, don't have homework, don't have school, whatever. So, yeah, I was just playing Rayman 2 and just having a really great, time. Um, so, why don't we talk about the characters a little bit? So, one thing that's really cool about this game is that there's all these really quirky, unique, and lovable, charming characters. This game was developed by Michel Ancel, and Michel Ancel has a very special place in my heart. I'm not sure if anyone who might be listening to this might remember, but my very first episode with you guys and with you, Josh, was the Beyond Good and Evil episode, which I was thrilled to do. That game means so much to me, and Michel Ancel also made Beyond Good and Evil, so there's a lot of, I don't know, he has this very unique style, and like when you see something that's made by him, like you can just see it right away. He just has this very unique touch to what he does, and has a very different way of doing things, really. Although I will say he did make the King Kong game for GameCube, and that doesn't really fit his style, but the way that he approached that game was really unique because he didn't want there to be like a life meter or anything. He wanted you to like feel how much life you had. So like the more damaged you were, the more like red your vision was and stuff like that. So he's a very outside the box thinker, and you definitely get a taste for that with this game. So sorry, going back to the characters. So I'm just gonna list a few of them and kind of quickly describe them. So Josh, let me know if any of these, when I'm finished, kind of really grab you. So first of all, there's obviously Rayman. So Rayman, in case someone's listening and doesn't really know who he is, Rayman basically, oof, that's I don't even know how to describe him really. He's kind of like a dog-like humanoid character. I don't know, but he doesn't have limbs. That's like the main feature of Rayman. He just has a head with like these floppy ears. It's kind of cute, and like a long nose, and he has like a purple shirt with a circle on it, and then he just has like his fists and shoes. So no arms or legs really. So very interesting character design. And then we have his friend Glubix, which is this large blue, chubby guy, and he's kind of he's kind of clumsy, and he's like this funny little guy, and he like puts things in his mouth and stuff. Josh, did you want to say something about Glubbox?
Glowbox.
Glubbox, yeah. Why did you say Glowbox?
That's what I thought. Am I saying it wrong?
You say Glowbox?
Yeah, Glowbox.
I mean, I think they say Glubbox in the game. I said Glowbox because, Globox. I would just say Glowbox. But
Yeah, Glowbox.
according to the game, it says Glubbox.
Huh.
So, not that it really matters,
I'm just
but yeah,
curious.
I think Glowbox sounds better. But yeah,
Yeah.
but I love that Glowbox has this ability to summon rain for some reason. So at random points in the game, he'll like start dancing around and have this like funny little song going on, and then he'll summon a cloud, and then rain will come down, and it'll like put out a certain like put out the flames of something, or it'll like make a trap go haywire, an electronic trap go haywire, and then you can like walk through it. There's no more lasers that you have to worry about. Or it'll rain on a plant, and that plant will grow, and then you'll be able to use that plant for whatever it is. Like if it's a plum, you could use that as a platform, or if it becomes a flower, you can use that to like get transported to a different area. So it comes in handy for various situations. And we also have Murphy. Murphy is like a green little guy who kind of flies around. He's kind of like a fairy, but like with a pretty wide, stupid face. And he's just pretty cute and charming. I like him a lot. My favorite thing about Murphy is the way that he talks.
I like his voice a lot.
Exactly. Yep. No, that's exactly what I wanted to say. So like every time you walk to like his space or whatever that is, like his sign, I'm not sure like when he comes up to you, or just like random moments he'll fly up to you. And so you'll just start walking, and then the game will pause, and then you see Murphy flying towards you, and he just goes, Rayman. And that's just his voice.
This is a weird ASMR now.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Yeah. It's kind of like more French Banjo Kazooie gibberish talk in a way. So yeah, it's just like a very strange but very welcome odd personality trait of this game and this character. Um, there's also Clark, who isn't in the game too much, but he's like this big chunky guy who's really strong, doesn't really know his own strength, and is able to like burst through walls and stuff, and kind of helps you at random points. We also have Lee, who is a fairy that you meet. She has like these magical powers, and she's a pretty somewhat central figure in the story. I don't really remember too much. I just remember she's like this, I don't know, ancient fairy who gives you powers, and she does give you like these abilities. So as you progress in the game, you'll meet her more and more, and then your abilities will be upgraded. And do you remember Palakis, Josh?
Yes. The big Loch Ness monster looking thing, right?
No, that is Sam
Wait a minute.
with many S's.
Gosh, I got their names confused.
Yeah, that's okay. I was just kind of quizzing you. So Palakis, I don't know if you'll remember him, but because I totally forgot about this. So this guy is he kind of looks like this. I don't know, this little stubby guy. And he's like a big hat, and he's like this ancient figure in like the dream world or something. And he's like these long,
Oh yeah.
long
Duh.
hands. um, yeah. So
Yeah.
there's Palakis. I don't remember too much about him. I just know he's like a magical figure in that world. And then, of course, we have two more people I wanted to mention. We have Razorbeard, who is the, head pirate, robot pirate captain, and he's like the main enemy of the game. And I just really like his character design. He's this little frumpy, stumpy, I don't know, robot pirate guy with like I don't know, it's hard to describe. He's like razors all across his beard. That's why he's called Razor Beard.
He's a little bit over the top. Like he's a robot
Yeah.
pirate anyway, so that already seems sort
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
over the top, I guess.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I just think he has a pretty cool design.
Yeah.
And actually, we don't really see him too much in like future games now that I think about it, which is a shame because he's pretty cool. Um, And then, of course, there's the teensies. The teensies are these tiny little eccentric, weird, magical jokesters, and I guess they're from like ancient times, and they just like to joke around, and they kind of like, I don't know, they do random little things for you, and they're kind of important to the story. So I really like the teensies, and they do reappear in like future games. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the teensies. I don't know about you, Josh.
Yeah, I think it's pretty funny how they fight over who is the real king of them
Yep.
during this game. I don't know if you ever do find out who really is the king.
I don't remember either, but that's it's part of the fun of it. I actually became a huge fan of Rayman after I played this game. It introduced me to the Rayman universe, and shortly after Rayman Advance came out, so I was really happy about that. But there's just something really charming and delightful. I know I might sound like a broken record with these adjectives that I use, but there's just something so great about this world. Like Michel Ancel, the guy who created this game and many other great games, he just has this knack for creating these universes that are just so believable and just have so much polish to them. He thinks about every single detail of these worlds, and like I would actually compare it to like Disney. Like, in any Disney movie, like obviously they've thought about every single nook and cranny of these worlds and universes that these stories take place. And this game is really not that much more different. Like, you just heard the different characters within the game, and all the unique characteristics that each of them has, and the personalities that they have. And I may not have done the best job describing them, but like if you look at them, their character designs are just very striking and memorable, and just cool, really. So yeah, that's something that this game has in spades: personality. So that's one thing that really stands out when you play this game. So at the time when Rayman 2 came out, a lot of 3D platformers were around. So Banjo Kazooie was around. Mario 64 came out not too long before that. And like I mentioned before, this game is a lot more linear than those. So there is a map, and you kind of choose which stage you go to. But the way that the map works, it kind of like fits into the story. It's like part of the Hall of Doors. So again, they thought of like every single detail of this game. So there's like a reason why that map is like that and why you access it the way that you do. I wanted to kind of talk about the tone just a tiny bit. So in case one is listening and they haven't picked up on it just yet, the game's very silly. It's very whimsical, but the story that you embark on is really epic. And it does have like some dark tones to it, but in a cartoony way, really. So there's the like enslavement is a part of the story where some of the characters get stuck on the pirate ship and stuff, but like it's fine for kids, and I think it's a great way for kids to kind of get started with a 3D platformer game. And let me just touch on the difficulty, because Josh, I'm really curious to see what you think about this. So, in terms of difficulty, I don't think the game is that hard, but it's not insanely easy. Like sometimes it would take me like three or so tries, and I think that's great because you know, Rayman's been ported several times to different systems. I do appreciate that Ubisoft is trying to make Rayman keep being a thing, and I think this is like the perfect game for that. So, Josh, I'm really curious to see if Rayman 2, in whatever form it might be, let's say they port it to the Switch, do you think that this is a game that your daughter would pick up on and would
I
appreciate?
think so, and granted, she knows who Rayman is at this point, but I think even without that, I think she very well could. I think one thing with this game versus a lot of other 3D platformers and such, especially at the time, is the tone, especially at first in the game, is pretty dark. Um, so it's almost kind of gritty, but again, like you said, it's sort of in a cartoony sort of way. There's not like blood or anything like that necessarily, but it's just got a very um, kind of a dark setting the whole time, like a pirate ship, um, and then like a swamp and things like that. That it seems to carry, at least from what I've seen through most of the game. Um, so, but that being said, I think it would benefit from something like maybe sort of an HD remake, not like completely remake the whole thing, but something that would sort of up the way I feel like the atmosphere was set. Not that anything was wrong with it, but going back to it, I guess now, like plugging in my 64 a week or so ago, and turning it on. I feel like it was almost difficult to see, and I don't think that's just because I'm old. I just feel like it could use a little bit of, I don't know if it's as much as the game as it is just the 64 or the old TVs and things like that, but
Yeah, the N64
um,
does not age too well.
I just feel like it's a very dark game in a lot of ways, and in some ways I think that actually it sets the tone pretty well. It's not like the rest of them.
Right. Yeah, I saw it a lot, like kind of like Beyond Good and Evil, where it's like this whimsical world, but there's something serious going on.
Yeah,
In Beyond Good and Evil, there's like alien invasions and corruption and stuff like that, but it's told in this really beautiful cartoony world, and it's a lot like Rayman, where these pirates, they, now that I think of it, they do invade the world and they do kind of enslave people. I hate to use that word, but that is what's happening in the game.
yeah,
And it's a very serious situation within this cartoony story, but it has a very playful take on it, and it's not like too serious where it's like uncomfortable for kids. Like like I mentioned
yeah,
before, I was like 9 or 10 when I played this, so it was perfectly fine. There was never a point where I was like scared or anything, and the visuals really do help with that, and also the music as well. So, but I did want to mention, the controls are just fine, I think, in this game. I think they were perfectly appropriate for the N64 controller. Something that I thought was really great was that, and I don't know if you remember this, Josh, like in the game, when you are in a situation and you kind of are like, I'm not really sure what to do. If you approach a certain item that is like kind of key to that stage, it'll kind of just like like Rayman will just interact with that object like automatically. Like if you're near a barrel and you're like, I'm not really sure what to do with this barrel. If you just walk up to it, Rayman will just grab it automatically. So, and then he'll just like lug it on his back. So that you have this idea of like, okay, I need to bring this somewhere, obviously. So let me just like look around and see what I have to do. So, and also this one stage that's one of my favorites. I'm going to mention that this one a little bit later, but you're in this area and there's like this rocket horse that comes at you and you have to have it kind of chase you around and then get tired out, and then like once it's like panting, you kind of walk up to it and Rayman just automatically gets on his back and then you start riding him. So I found that really helpful as a 10-year-old for things to just kind of happen automatically. It's not like too easy in a way, but it does kind of guide you and not have things be like too obtuse for you to like not know what to do next. So I really appreciated that. Um, and but one thing that I noticed when I was going back to it is that you don't have control over the camera, at least not in the 3DS version. I don't think you do in the N64 version. I don't really remember, but that's different and something that like is kind of hard to get used to, but it really is just fine. Did you have any issues with that, Josh, or do you remember having any issues with that?
yeah. If I remember correctly, I think you can sort of pull it behind you, almost like a think of like Zelda Z targeting, almost like not quite as sharp. But I think that's about
Yeah.
all you really have. It sounds like it without playing it. I feel like, oh, you don't have any control over the camera in a game like this. Sounds terrible. But I think for the most part, it works. Like I don't
Yeah.
remember having a lot of issues with it. It's a little bit of a pain, like if you pass something you want to go back and collect, and you're trying to see, or you're like, hey, wait, maybe there's something hidden over here. If there's nothing over there and the game doesn't want you to go there, the
Right.
camera's not going to care that you're trying to go over there.
Right. Yeah, totally.
But for the most part, it really isn't that much of a problem. At least I don't think it was.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And I've mentioned this a couple times, but this game is more linear, and it's not just in like the stage design or like world design where like as you progress you unlock a new stage and then you go to that stage. Like yeah, that's true, it is linear in that way, but also the stages themselves are linear. Like there's not really any backtracking now that I think of it. Like you kind of just go forward for a lot of it, although that happens in like different ways. It's not like it's too straightforward. Like there's a lot of zigzagging around and stuff, so they do kind of disguise it in that way. but so there's not really a need for you to really control the camera really. It is like a 3D space that you're in, but like you're pretty much just going forward or like a little bit left, a little bit to the right, so it's really not that big of a deal. So I was really surprised by that. Like at first, at least this is what I do when I play a new like 3D game. I kind of like play around with the camera just to like see what I can do. And so at first I was like pretty alarmed by the fact that I couldn't control it, but the more that I played the game, I kind of like forgot I didn't really need to do that. So, just wanted to mention that. Not really a big deal. So, playing it on the 3DS when you don't have any camera control, even with like the C stick is there, but like you don't really need it. So, I was very pleasantly surprised by that. Um, some other issues with the controls is that you can upgrade your abilities, but like the upgrades that you get in the game are not that major. Like at first, you kind of get the ability to hover, which is like kind of something you just get used to throughout the game, so that's pretty necessary. Although I will say the ability to hover with your ears, like that's just really great for me as or at least it was for me as a beginner platform lover, because it gives you a little bit more time to judge your jumps a little bit better, so there's some room for mistakes to be had, or whatever I'm trying to say. And also like the abilities that you get, you're able to hover, which is cool. You can eventually punch, and then you can like punch stronger and some other things. So it was easy for me to like understand what these abilities were, and also the game uses these very simple abilities in pretty clever ways. So like with the hover ability, like yeah, you can hover and go to like a downward platform a little bit easier, but at the same time, there's some levels that require you to like go into a gust and then like kind of go upwards. So you kind of use your hover ability as like a helicopter ability. So you go upwards because of it. So I just thought it was a really a cool thing to see every once in a while, where they kind of switch things up with like these very basic abilities. So that was pretty cool. But like as far as items go, you don't really find too many items that you use in the game. Just like very simple things. So I mentioned a barrel before, so you could like throw a barrel at an enemy, something like that, or plums. Plums are like a main feature of like the Rayman series right now, or like they always have and will continue to be. So you can like punch a plum and it'll bounce down, and then you hop on top of it and it'll be like a little platform for you. And so, Josh, I'm kind of curious about your thoughts on this too. So, how did you like the plum levels, if you remember those, where you kind of like punch out, and then when your fist comes back to you, you kind of go in that direction. So I thought that was like a really unique way of controlling the plum. Do you remember those at all?
I may, but it's been a few years since I've made it there on the 3DS one, I believe. I know there was sort of like the
Yeah.
grappling
Yes. Oh
move,
yeah.
so to speak, where you could shoot the like the hooks up in the ceiling. You could swing, and that was pretty handy. It was easy to use. Again, that's one where the helicopter ability I think really was helpful, like for the timing. If you don't jump off of the swing exactly right, that helicopter ability can be a lifesaver. Um,
Yep. Totally.
I'm trying to remember the plums offhand if it's anything like that.
Yeah, the plums aren't around that much. They, every time you see them, it's kind of like, I don't know, like you're kind of like going down a river or something, or like a lava pit or something, and so you kind of just have to like avoid the more hotter lava. Yeah, I don't know. It was a
Yeah.
pretty cool idea to like kind of navigate by using like the momentum of your fists. So I thought that was pretty interesting and something that I was able to appreciate as a young kid. But I definitely want to talk about the art style of this game, because I think that's something that makes this game as timeless as it is, and I think it holds up so much better than a lot of other N64 games. So, like, it's no secret that I absolutely love Banjo Kazooie. You and I both are huge Banjo Kazooie nuts, to say the least. But I have to say, I think Rayman 2 holds up a little bit better, in a way, because it's just the art style is so like clean and smooth and like simple in a way that I at least think that it could be ported like pretty much forever and hold up just fine. What do you think about the graphics, Josh?
It's almost hard for me to say just for one where I didn't grow up with it versus a game like Mario 64 or Banjo-Kazooie in this example. Um, because you know, a part of me wants to lean towards that, wants to lean towards Banjo-Kazooie looking good. And I know like on the most recent time I played it was on the Xbox version, and that one looks really good. But granted, that one's a little bit upgraded. I haven't played this one with that sort of upgrade. Yeah, I think it holds up well, like you were saying. But sort of like I mentioned earlier, I do feel like it could use just a wee bit more polish, like if they'd bring it back. Um, but for the most part, I think you're right. I think for one, maybe this is sort of an odd thing I noticed, but I feel like Rayman looks really good. Like a lot of the character models, I feel like look really good. And I don't really feel like they need much work. I think they
Yeah.
could mostly leave that alone. I think most of what I've noticed is sort of like the textures, or you know, some of the platforms and things like that just feel a little bit off. But for the most part, it really is it really is good. And I could see where you're coming from, thinking that you know that they really wouldn't need to make hardly any, if any, changes at all, to bring it back to modern day, basically just as is for the most part.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, I played this on the 3DS, and I think that the 3DS is kind of like, I believe from what I understand, it's like the Dreamcast version, just like a port of that. So it's basically just like a more cleaned up version of the N64 game, and it looks exactly like I remember it. And I have to say, like, they did a great job cleaning that game up. And like kind of made me realize that the 3DS was a lot more capable than I thought. And this was like a launch 3DS game, so to see like how clean and crisp this game looks on the 3DS was really surprising. But there's just something about the art style that's just so interesting, because it's not like it's basic. It's not like the Wind Waker where Link just has yellow hair, really. There is a good amount of detail, but it's still like simplistic in its own way. So I don't know. The way that I would describe the art style is that it's very colorful and whimsical for sure. That's just like Michel Ancel's kind of signature style. And just like the story, there's kind of like something mysterious about the tone of the graphics in a way. So they use a lot of like greens and purples and like golds, and I feel like that kind of adds to this tone of mystery and quirkiness that the game has. So when I was playing the game, I was reminded of like Alice in Wonderland in a way, except it's kind of like a more like, I don't know, cartoony, alien like fantasy type of Alice in Wonderland vibe. But that's just me. It's just like very whimsical and mysterious, like I've said. But the graphics are just so polished and well designed and thought out that like I would not be surprised if like a TV show for Rayman could happen at some point in the future. Like they have pretty much everything that they need, and it's just like this fully realized world, and like you see the style that Michel Ancel was going for in every corner of this game. Like as you're playing the game, you'll see like these butterflies with like happy faces, or these like dancing mushrooms, and like they don't do anything at all. They serve absolutely no function. They're basically just there to
Yeah.
make you feel more immersed in this world. So that's just something that I appreciate, like these little details. And you know again, this is for the N64, so for them to be able to have these small, detailed animations for something that's happening in the background is really mind blowing, and I really like that a lot. I also think that like with the graphics, they use like kind of like a mix of different types of graphics in a way. So like Rayman himself is 3D, but the sprites, like the mushrooms that I mentioned, they kind of like these little, mushrooms that are besides trees, and they like kind of dance along each other. Though they're sprites, so I guess that's what enables them to you know, um, be seen just fine without the frame rate dragging or whatever. And some of the backgrounds are static, but they kind of like look like they're moving. And sometimes they're just like two or multiple static backgrounds that kind of like interact with each other to give the illusion that they're moving. moving, like with the water or the air or something like that. So they were just really masterful with what they were able to accomplish with the game, and just make it as immersive as it is, like that world as immersive as it is, and just looking technically impressive on a system that really was not overly capable. So yeah, it's just something that I was like thinking about when I was going back to it. Something I definitely want to mention, because I really didn't remember this too well. The music and sound design of this game is phenomenal. I was totally struck by how amazing the music is in this game, because that's not really something that comes to mind when I think of Rayman. Do you have any thoughts on the sound design or the music, Josh?
Yeah, I've caught myself even listening to some of it a little outside of the game. I like it. And I think it fits that tone very well, like you were sort of talking about before. It's sort of got that magical, mystical kind of vibe to it, but it's its own flavor of it. It's not all what you would think of when you hear that. Like it's not all like the traditional looking fairies and unicorns or whatever and that sort of thing. I think the music fits the tone of the game very well, and I think it's like I said, if you like listening to game music anyway, it's sort of a decent listen outside of it.
Yeah, totally. Yep. I also really like the sound design. So in regards to the sound design, like all these little like jingles and just little sounds that you hear every once in a while, like when you get a lum, or when you like you walk on a certain surface or something. Like all these sounds are just a super satisfying, and b like they have their own unique personality to them themselves. Like just the sounds themselves really bring out the personality of the world. So it's just like another extra detail that they thought of when they were creating the game. So it's really cool to go back to it and see that, and hear it. Really, it's just like, and it's everywhere you go, and when you interact with something, there's just some kind of interesting noise or sound that just really draws you in.
I was gonna say there is something I want to mention on that while we're sort of talking about the sound, and maybe you were planning on going into that, but the voices in the game on the N64 version, and I believe the 3DS one, if I remember right. I had to play that one some without the sound up all the way, but the voices are sort of gibberish,
Hmm.
not quite like what you hear from Banjo Kazooie or Ukulele or something. It's like you said earlier, it's sort of its own thing. But they do all have their own voices. They all have their own sounds. I guess you could say similar to like
Hmm.
Banjo Kazooie, but in the PlayStation version, they actually speak like full regular sentences. Yeah, so it's almost jarring, but I actually think it was done really well. Like it's not,
Oh, I
you
didn't
would
know
think with
that.
a game like that back in the 90s that the voice acting in it probably wouldn't be much to celebrate, but from what I've seen of that version of it, at least so far, it's really not that bad. I thought that was sort of an interesting thing they added to that one, and I'm not sure if it's in any of the others. It might be in like the
Huh.
Dreamcast one, or I think there's a Windows version of it and things like that. But I think it's on PS2 as well. It might be in that, but yeah, I thought that was sort of interesting. They went back and decided to add actual voices to it, or actual dialogue to it.
Yeah. Do the voices? Do you know if like the voices are they the same as like the gibberish talking voices, or are they totally different?
It very much seems like it.
Okay.
From what I can tell, it seems like I don't know any of the voice actors or anything like that offhand, but like if they went back and used the same voice actors, that wouldn't surprise me at all because they sound
Hmm.
pretty much like what I would expect. Now I haven't heard Murphy talk at all though. I saw Murphy, but I haven't heard him speak. So and I'd almost be disappointed. His little weird whisper kind of sound is almost satisfying to hear. So I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
know, but yeah, just sort of an interesting little fact to add to that.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I didn't realize that. I'm gonna have to look that up later, because I've only played the N64 version, which definitely didn't have voice clips, and the 3DS one does not too. The 3DS one's basically the N64 version, just like slightly prettier, really. Cool. Yeah, I'll have to look into that. I'm really curious now. I'd like to kind of jump to the environments and like the level design that they have. We kind of mentioned a few things already, but I just wanted to say that like I was really impressed from like a level design perspective, just how well made the levels are, and I was surprised going back to it because the levels are like for well, yeah, first of all, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of levels in this game, which I was not expecting at all. I thought the game was a lot shorter than what I ended up playing, because I don't know. I guess I dedicated like I don't know a whole day to it and just like beat it in like the whole day or like a couple of days. It really didn't take me that long in the summer, but I've been playing it for like 2 weeks now, and I'm only at like 35%, I think, and I've been playing it for a few hours and I'm still like,
Yeah.
not that far into it. So I am very impressed with how many levels there are, but also the length of the levels surprised me too. So they're not like overly long, but they're pretty lengthy. It takes about, I don't know, 20 or so minutes to beat a level. Um, I mean, each one's completely different, but it's not like New Super Mario Brothers where you go from left to right in like 3 or so minutes or something. This takes like a little bit of thinking and consideration, and there's multiple phases of the levels too. So like at first you'll be hopping and bopping around, and then you'll be racing on one of those rocket horse things, or you'll be jet skiing with that snake thing,
Yeah.
and then after that you'll be I don't know trying to avoid a pirate ship's cannons that are being shot against you. So there's multiple phases, and that's what adds to the length of these levels. So it's just really impressive what they were able to do for the N64. Yeah, just wanted to kind of mention that. But yeah, I would describe the levels themselves as being kind of like tropical, kind of foresty. It's kind of like this like magical type of swamp, and it's kind of like this mix between being alien and fantasy in a way. So
Yeah.
it's just like its own weird thing, and I like that a lot, because it's very rare that you play a game that really just tries to be its own kooky, strange thing. Because there's a lot of copycat games out there these days. Um,
This one definitely wasn't like I think in that era there was a lot of games guilty of being sort of a copycat of Mario 64 more than anything. You could
true.
even sort of argue Banjo-Kazooie was as much as I love that game and I think it's better than Mario 64 even. This game really did sort of stick out. I mean, again, I didn't play it back then, but looking back in comparison to everything else that was out, it not only had its own sort of feel with the atmosphere, but the game itself and the way it was played.
Yeah.
You said it was a bit more linear, but it kind of worked here. It's kind of nice for a little change from pace anyway. And the levels themselves aren't super long. So if you miss something and you do want 100%, it seems sort of doable to go back without getting frustrated. Like, oh, I missed. It's like in a Crash Bandicoot game when you miss one box. If you've ever played one of
Right.
those, that's a pain in the butt. I don't feel like that's as much of a problem here. Like if you're going for 100%, at least again from my perspective, I feel like it's doable. They're not going to hide a ton of the lums from you as deviously as maybe some other games would.
It really depends on the levels. Some are a little bit more devious than others, but yeah, it's with Crash. It's like sometimes it's really hard to find where those boxes are. But one thing that I in a way I would kind of disagree because there were some things that were really hard in the game to find because like we mentioned before, you don't have control over the camera. So there are some things that you have to find, and you can't, pan around with the camera to go find them. You have to kind of like find them by chance. So that's something that was
Yeah.
a little strange. Like there were some lums that I found completely by chance because like I don't know, the camera glitched out or like I accidentally went to this one corner of the game and found it. So there is that, but like I don't know, that's fine. Like I don't mind kind of like finding things by chance. Like it's Rayman. It's not like this very serious game, so I don't think I'm gonna be too hung up on not finding all these lums. I don't know. That's just me. But Yeah, there's lots of levels, like I mentioned before, but in each level there's multiple phases, but across every single level, there's so much variety in what you do in this game, and that I think is like the biggest strong point of the game. So, in any particular level, you're like platforming. There's like a little bit of stealth. There's like this, I've mentioned this a few times, where there's like this rocket horse that comes up to you. You wait for it to get tired, and then you start riding it. And then when you're riding it, you have to like avoid these obstacles that are kind of like shooting out at you. And one of my favorite parts, and I'll mention this in like a little bit, is like where you're sitting on a chair and you kind of have to like spin the chair around in like 360 degrees to like avoid things coming at you. It's kind of like this roller coaster in a way. That was like my favorite level. And there's like bosses. There's like these levels that are a little bit more epic than the other ones. These sanctuaries. So there's like the sanctuary of like fire and stone, and the sanctuary of water and ice. And there's only a few of them, but like they're kind of like these big deal, pretty epic levels. And I really appreciated those because, as a kid, I was big on like the elements of the like nature and stuff. I just thought it was fun when things played around with like this balance of natural forces. So, water, fire, ice, you know, lightning, whatever. So I like that a lot. That really called to me as a kid. But there's also like where you jet ski with the snake. So I think you mentioned that character
Yeah.
before. That character's Sam. So it's
Yeah.
Sam with like many S's. So that was really fun. That's one of the first few levels you play, and I loved that level. That was so much fun.
Yeah, I think that was a really fun part, and I feel like again, sort of going back to this era, trying to think back to it. Some a lot of these games, they might throw in a little bit of variety or some sort of different bit of gameplay, sort of like that. But a lot of them, I don't feel like do it all that wonderfully. Where I feel like here it was done really nice, and it doesn't last, it doesn't overstay its welcome.
Yes, great point.
So that was, it almost actually made me want more out of it. Like I was like, oh man, that was it. Like, which felt good in comparison to some games that get into a loop like that, and the main gameplay that you want is being just overshadowed by some
Right.
side mission that you don't even really want to get through. I don't feel like that was the case here.
Yeah, totally. Yep, that's a really good point. And what I do appreciate with the variety is that these things kind of transition like so smoothly. Like when you're, like if you were to look at it on paper, a stage would have, some platforming, and then you would have like a ship chasing you, and you would have like an escort mission or something. But while those things have major differences, even though they're like within the same level, they just transition so smoothly, and they just found a way to have that kind of play out within the story of that level. So it's not something that you notice right away, or like something that you're very conscious of. Like it's just something that happens, and it's just a very smooth transition between these different types of categories of levels. So that was pretty cool, and definitely took a lot of consideration on their part. Josh, I was curious, do you have any like favorite levels from this game? Is there anything that like really comes to mind when you think of Rayman, and some levels that you had a lot of fun with?
Well, I mean, I know we just sort of mentioned it, but I did really like the one where you do get to ride. I'm gonna say it kind of funny, but that's Sam, the snake.
Yep.
That whole stage, I mean, that part was definitely the highlight of it, but the rest of it's just solid. Really, a lot of it doesn't. I don't want to say this like it sounds like a negative, but a lot of it doesn't stick out so much like over the rest of it. At least off the top of my head. But yeah, that one's one that sort of sticks out to me. Little things like that, or when it sort of diverted from the regular gameplay and did it in a fun way.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's one that I definitely remember as well. There were a few levels that I played when I was going back to it that I just completely forgot about. So one of them, and maybe you'll remember this one, is where you like follow a whale, and you kind of have to like chase after the air bubbles that the whale leaves you. So and something that happens a little bit later in that level is not only are you chasing after the air bubbles that whale is like leaving for you, but you have to get them later on before these piranhas get them. So it kind of like steps up the difficulty in a very clever and like believable way. So if you don't get to those air bubbles, the piranha's going to pop them, and then you'll have to chase even faster after the next air bubble. So I thought that was pretty interesting and like a fun little challenge within itself. Um,
Oh gosh, yeah.
and
I
and
remember running out of air on that one a lot.
Yes, yeah, that was not an easy one. I did play that one yesterday, and I was very proud of myself for getting through it in one try. So that was great. But I did not have nearly as much luck as a kid. That was a little difficult because, as we all know, water levels are the worst.
Yeah.
I hate swimming in any water level.
Donkey Kong
Um,
Country did it right, but yeah.
that's true. Yeah, in a 2D space, it's a lot better, but in a 3D space,
Right.
it's a little odd. And I think for this one, like you dive with A and then you rise to the surface with X or something like that. So it's one of those, and it's not the worst, it's not the best. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And one other favorite level is the I would say like the later stages of the game. So one thing that I appreciate with all of Michel Ancel's games is that the more you play, the more you're rewarded with a lot more interesting variety and surprises. So I'm not going to spoil anything, but the last few levels and especially the boss fight I thought were very very awesome, very cool, very outside the box, and just very cool and awesome.
Yeah.
And my favorite stage by far is the one that I kind of mentioned before, where you're like sitting in this chair. I'm not really sure what the story is, but like you're sitting in this chair and you kind of like move around from left to right in like a 360-degree plane. And as you're in this chair, it's kind of like this roller coaster where you're moving forward and you have to like avoid these obstacles that are coming at you. So you move around completely in a circle to avoid these obstacles, and it's just so much fun. And I died a lot in that one. It is not an easy stage, but it is just so fun. So yeah, love that stage. Love it.
Yeah.
Definitely comes towards the end, but it is well worth trying to get to that point. So that pretty much wraps up what I want to say about the game itself, but I think it's important to kind of talk about the legacy of Rayman. So at the time when Rayman 2: The Great Escape came out for the N64, it had a lot of great reviews. It scored quite well in all these different publications, and ever since it's been ported to so many things. It got ported to the original DS. As I mentioned before, it's on the 3DS, and Josh, you mentioned the Dreamcast and PlayStation 2, all these other things, and it sold okay. On the N64 alone, it sold. I had to do a little bit of research, and this might not be exact, but I think it sold like either at or just below around 1 million copies. So it's like pretty good, decent. But I find that the Rayman series hasn't really taken off and gotten the credit that I at least feel it deserves. I'm not exactly sure why. It is a European-made game, so I'm not sure if there's just something that doesn't really connect with audiences so much. But I at least think that the Rayman series should get a lot more recognition. And I think a great way to do this would be through making Rayman a Smash Brothers fighter. I think it is very well deserved if that were to happen. And so, Josh, what do you think? Like, why do you think Rayman might not be resonating with Americans or even people across the world for some reason?
That I'm not entirely sure. I feel like in a lot of ways, maybe even sort of speaking from my own experience, he sort of got overshadowed by some of the other mascotty characters at the time, which is a little hard
Right.
to accept just since he's so unique, just even as a character just to look at.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, especially nowadays, I think one of the last major, like actual major releases for that franchise was Rayman Legends, and that originally came out with the Wii
Mm-hmm.
U, what, in like 2012 or something like that.
Yeah. True.
So, and that's a great game, don't get me wrong, but like that's a huge gap for what was essentially like Ubisoft's like flagship character, I believe, there for a little
Mm-hmm.
while. And now I feel like he's just sort of on the wayside and they don't really use him for much. Um, so that's a big shame, and I feel like it's definitely time they bring him back. And since you mentioned it, yeah, Smash Brothers. Um, if they want to actually go for like the gaming icons and whatnot, I think that is an absolutely perfect fit. For one, Ubisoft has absolutely no representation
Right.
in characters outside of me costumes, with there being 80 some characters, and that's a pretty large company.
Hmm.
I don't understand that. And the other one, I think between Rayman and Crash, like I don't comprehend why they're not there,
Yeah.
other than the fact that they're Western. I won't get into all of that, but um, but yeah, I definitely think, especially something like that. And I know this is maybe putting a little more into Smash than maybe what it deserves. I don't know, but I'm a big fan of that series as well.
Yeah.
But I think something like that would really bring the attention back to that series, and give it a little bump that it deserves,
Right.
and possibly even make it a really good time to put out a new game. I know a lot of people that, particularly I follow, and I'm sort of in the same circles with, that would love to see that series come back. That really love that character. So yeah, I mean, I don't know why it wasn't as big as I feel like it could have been, but I don't feel like it's like a tiny franchise either. I feel like it's very well known. And I don't think we've seen the end of it. I think there's been like this huge sort of gap for sure, and I think a lot of that just comes down to the approach Ubisoft has been taking in recent years. Um, and again, that sometimes shifts. So I do believe we'll see it come back. I don't know in what form, but yeah, I do hope it's soon.
Yeah, totally. I was having this like random thought the other day. Like, I wonder if it might have something to do with the fact that it had like two in the name, because this was the first Rayman game that
Yeah,
came to a Nintendo platform, and
it's
for
true.
a game to start with two, it's just like, oh, I didn't play one, so I'm not sure
Yeah,
if I should get started with two if I don't know like the original story. But I mean, we didn't really know this at the time. I didn't know this until much later, but Rayman Advance was the first Rayman that was
yeah,
originally on PlayStation. So we would, in a way, kind of get it, and it would, come to DSiWare and all these other things. But yeah, I think like two might have had something to do with it. And I just feel like there's all these like weird steps that they take in trying to make Rayman be like as relevant as it should be. With Rayman 3D, I was really frustrated because a lot of the reviews that came out for Rayman 3D was that just more of the same game, and it was criticized for that, for not doing anything that new. But it just really annoyed me because it's like, yeah, it's the same thing, but it's what's there is great. The same thing with like Mario
yeah,
3D All Stars. It's like, yeah, they didn't do anything new with it and stuff. And like, yeah, there's definitely an argument that you can make for that, but what is there is awesome. It's unfortunate that they
yeah.
didn't add anything too different, but what's there is great. And it sucks because that really takes away from like the publicity that the game could get. So I think that might have been a factor with like the DS version, which I mean I didn't play, but I imagine it's probably a little inferior to the N64 version. So I'm sure other criticisms are very justified for that. But with Rayman 3D, what's there is a great version of a great N64 game. So that was really frustrating for me. And also, it has the benefit of pretty good 3D. Like stereoscopic 3D without the need for glasses that the 3DS had. So it's not like amazing 3D like Mario 3D Land, but it's pretty good pop out 3D. And to play a great N64 game on the go with stereoscopic 3D is pretty cool. And that's something that happened what, 10 years ago now, and it holds up perfectly fine. So
It does.
yeah, so if anyone's looking for a great portable 3D action adventure game, and if you're listening and this sounded like it was up your alley, I definitely recommend the 3DS version, to be honest. But Rayman does live on. It has had some titles and sequels ever since this game came out. So there was Rayman 3 for the GameCube, which I actually really loved. I don't remember too much about it, but I did really enjoy that one. I was speaking with our pal Ryan in the Nintendo Nostalgia chats on Facebook, and he mentioned Rayman Arena. which is a game I was always curious about. It's kind of like a Mario Party style game in a way. So I don't know too much about that, but I thought that was a pretty interesting take on the Rayman series. So yeah, I'll have to look into Rayman Arena. Josh, out of curiosity, did you ever play Rayman Arena or know anything about it?
I didn't.
Okay.
I know of it,
Yeah.
and I think I've watched like some videos on it or something, but no, I haven't played that one.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. I don't know. I love Rayman so much, and it would be great to kind of see a weird take on that universe. I was kind of scared. I will say that during the Wii era, the Rayman kind of had a spin-off. So there was supposed to be a sequel to Rayman 3. It was supposed to be basically Rayman 4, but they kind of changed things around to kind of fit the uniqueness of the Wii controller, and so that came in the form of Rayman Raving Rabbids, and that was a really big hit on the Wii, and so we saw a lot of sequels once that came out, and it actually started to resonate with people, and so I was happy. It was kind of like a conflicting reaction on my end because I was happy that Rayman was starting to do well and getting recognition, but it wasn't so much Rayman, it was these Raving Rabbids. And after a while, it didn't even become Rayman Raving Rabbids. It just became Rabbids, blah, blah, blah. Rabbids go on vacation or go to the moon or some stuff like that. So I was kind of worried that they were going to forget about where these rabbits came from the Rayman universe, But luckily, they did bring back Rayman a little bit later. So Rayman Origins did appear towards the end of the Wii's life cycle. Rayman Legends was a pivotal and really important Wii U release to me. So on top of Mario 3D World, I bought my Wii U for Rayman Legends as well, and I just cherish that game. One of the best games I've ever played in my entire life. So yeah, so if you're looking to play something with that same, Rayman personality and charm and polish, I highly, highly recommend Rayman Origins for the Wii and Rayman Legends for the Wii U. They both play similarly, but they're both great in their own unique ways. They do things a little bit differently. So yeah, those are great games that are unfortunately still overlooked. I don't know what that's about. I think they're both masterpieces, but I am just glad that they exist and that they experimented with the art styles that they have at that time. A very cool hand drawn art engine that exists. I hope they bring that back. I haven't seen that in a while. But anyway, that is basically what I have to say about Rayman. Well, let me just add one quick thing about replayability because for some reason I put this at the end of my notes. There is a lot to go back to in Rayman 2. They do like give you these percentages and like totals of the lums and cages that you find at each level. So it is worth going back and replaying some of the levels in Rayman. So and there are bonus levels as well. So Josh, let me just get your quick opinion. What are your thoughts on like going back to Rayman? Do you see yourself going back and playing a game like this?
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially like I said, I know I have never like fully completed it, and given the time, I definitely and a good comfortable way to play it. Like I said, I'd prefer to play it sort of on my TV, like the 64 version or something. Um, but yeah, I would definitely go back to this or something like it. Or, like I said, I'd be very interested if they would just re-release the thing like on the Switch or something. I think would be perfect where you
Right.
didn't need something we didn't mention actually on the 64 version. You need the one of the memory cards on the 64 for it to save.
Oh,
And going
okay.
back to that, I'd forgotten about that, and I had to go out and find another memory card. I've lost my old ones, so it was just something I never really needed. Most first-party Nintendo games never use that thing.
Yeah.
So it's that's a little bit annoying.
Yeah, totally forgot about that. I don't even think I have mine, so I'm glad I didn't play that version. I would have been really annoyed that I couldn't save.
Yeah, I wish this was one that would just get re-released again. I know there was a million releases of it back in the day, but I think it would be one that's easily sort of slapped onto the eShop or something.
Yep,
Um, I think
totally.
the Xbox, I think it was in the 360 era, they brought out like Rayman 3 on there, and I've still got it downloaded on my Xbox One.
Hmm.
But two's not on there, so I don't see why this hasn't at least just been sort of ported over to something more recent. I would definitely play through it again, especially on the Switch or something.
Yeah, and like knowing Ubisoft's track record, like we've mentioned a few times already, they've ported it to so many things, and I'm just so honestly, I just think that it's a matter of time that they do port it to the Switch. Like they have no problem porting this game to anything really. So, yeah, so I think it might be like a matter of time that it'll be on either Switch or like the next Switch, console. And also, I wanted to mention that Rayman has appeared on like iPhone games, so like Rayman Run or something
Yeah.
like that. So I do think that those are somewhat popular. So it is pretty good that he's getting like a second wind with those types of games. So they're still experimenting, and I'm sure they'll figure it out someday. Because I'm pretty sure that that they know that what they have is gold, and they'll they'll find their audience eventually. They'll just have to be consistent with trying to get it out there to the right audience in the right ways. Yeah, so I guess that's all we have to say about Rayman. Are there any games, Josh, real quick, that you think are similar to Rayman, Rayman 2 at least, that like we can't play it on the Switch, but if someone has a hankering for playing a game that's like Rayman 2, are there any games on the Switch that are similar to it? There's one that kind of came to mind. I haven't played it myself, but I feel like New Super Lucky's Tale, if that's what it's called, might be like kind of similar. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've played through New Super Lucky still actually myself. I've almost forgot about it. I completely went through that one, and yeah, it's you're not too far off on that. It's it's a little more open, maybe. It's still got some linearness to it, so to speak. So yeah, that one comes to
Yeah.
mind. Another one that is, not like well, I don't mean this in a negative text, but another game that's sort of older that is also on the Switch. I was going to say not like an indie game. Is the Tao the Tasmanian Tiger games,
Oh yeah, true. Yeah.
and a lot of those levels are somewhere in between. I would say what I would call open. They're mostly open, but they've kind of got a linear direction to them as well. So that's pretty similar. I would even say that like the Crash and Sane trilogy, I think it's similar to that in where the stages are very linear, but there's a lot of extra collectibles and things to go back and grab. It definitely plays different. Don't get me wrong, Crash and Rayman aren't quite the same thing, but
Right.
I could see if you like that type of game, I think any of those three, off the top of my head, would be a decent thing to give a shot at least.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, those are really good suggestions. I would not have thought to have added Crash, but like in a way, yeah, it does play a little bit like a Crash game in a way. I also wanted to mention that like, Super Mario 3D World is around the corner, and in a way, they have a lot of similarities.
Right.
There's these more linear stages, and you can kind of pick and choose which stage you want, and it's just like very whimsical and silly and colorful and stuff. So I think that might be a great game that's pretty similar and might prepare you for Rayman 2. And even though these two games are a little bit more open worldy, they have some similarities and
Right.
have like similar amounts of variety. But you mentioned the Crash trilogy. There's also the Spyro trilogy on the Switch,
Yep.
and there is also A Hat in Time, which I think you and I both really adore. At least I do. I don't know if you played that one, but I love A Hat in Time because it's a lot like Banjo Kazooie, which we love. And yeah, so those are our recommendations for games that are similar to Rayman 2. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. We really appreciate it. If you did enjoy this episode, we would really love it if you could leave us a review on whichever podcast service you're using. Josh, can you tell us I'm sorry, can you tell our listeners where they could find us on social media?
Sure. One of the best places to find us would be on Twitter at Nintendo underscore um, NOS. I'm sorry. Nintendo underscore nostalgia there. And also on Facebook on Nintendo Nostalgia. And there's also, of course, the Facebook group for Nintendo Nostalgia on there. And that's a place where we usually have a lot of different conversations and things like that going on. So go check that out when you can. Um, yeah, other than that, we've discussed a couple things maybe coming in the future, but yeah, be sure to follow us on there and keep up with everything that's going on. We'd be happy to have you there.
Yep. We would love to have anyone join us on any of those platforms that you mentioned. And another thing that I wanted to bring up is that we love when our listeners leave us voicemail. So if you wanted to leave us a voicemail about anything really, anything gaming related, feel free to do that. So our voicemail number is 317 969 5690. Again, that is 317 969 5690. Well, that is about it for what we have for this episode today. Thank you guys again so very much for listening to us. We hope that if you get a chance to play Rayman, that you end up loving it. If you do, please let us know. But in the meantime, we'll see you next time. We have a great episode planned for you next week, and we look forward to talking to you guys then. All right? Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.